The next presentation that we would be having is absolutely going to be an interesting one because the speaker is a product of the Kennedy School of Government. And so to speak about governance and accountability is a standard. He is also the CEO of Opportunic, a global fund. He's a registered investor, and he is the CEO of Opportunic, a global Opportunic Global Fund. I beg your pardon. He is the CEO of Opportunic Global Fund, a global fund for Africans by Africans. He is a registered funds manager and investor. Ladies and gentlemen, please, with all of your attention and applause, give a round of applause for Mr. Kola Oyeneyin.
Thank you. Let me first appreciate God for the opportunity to stand and speak on this platform and to honor my father and my mother in the Lord, Daddy and Mommy Gio, for who they are and what they do. Please help me just celebrate them for who they are to us and what they do. I also want to honor and celebrate the memory of my dear brother, friend, someone that we shared such a unique relationship up until his home calling. Our beloved and very dear Pastor Adeboye, on whose legacy we're gathering here today. Let's also put our hands together as we celebrate his memory. And to the entire family, my friend, Pastor Leke, my sisters, my brother, I greet every one of you. And I really please permit me to stand on all existing protocols already created because of time so we can get into the conversation. I think His Excellency has done such a fantastic job in the keynote address. And so what I had done, and also followed by the brilliant presentation on the diaspora, connecting the two, both Nigerian and then, of course, the other part of the world, connecting both together. And as His Excellency was speaking, I was canceling out a bunch of the things I had in my notes, so I don't have to repeat them. So the challenge with many times speaking last before a panel or speaking last at all is a double-edged sword. One is that everybody has said everything that you wanted to say, in which case you can say, oh, thank you very much, have a nice day, everybody. The other side of it is that they haven't said everything, but they've spoken so well that they've now made your job a lot more difficult because you now there's an expectation, a bar has been set. So right now, I'm under pressure. But, this foundation's work is such a notable one in that not many foundations are actually focused on when I looked at the 6 goals or areas that is focused on, and I'm really proud of the specific, how specific the foundation is around, for instance, something as simple as potable water, which is a major problem in Nigeria, but we hardly talk about it. It's unbelievable, but the fact that we looked that deep, and so again, for everyone who's involved at the back end of the foundation, I want to celebrate all of you for the work that you're doing. God bless you, in Jesus' name. Okay, so I typically, when they read profiles, I always CEO of this, he does this and all of that. I always try to remind people that I wear multiple hats. So I'm standing here today. I want to say that I'm a minister of the gospel as well, and that for me is actually my first function. But by the function or by what I do in the private sector, many times I have to also do this in that speak from the economic development's point of view, also speak from business and the indices that we see from the private sector and how government policies impact what we do in the private sector, and how, of course, that impacts what we do in the church. When you find out that 8 or 9 out of our prayer points are actually failures of government policies, and many times a lot of our testimonies, I was kidnapped and rescued, is a failure of government policy. And so you find that someone like me, who by the grace of God has been given the opportunity to walk across board from being a proud son of the Redeemed Christian Church of God, a minister here, and then stepping out and being in the private sector and seeing what unlocking opportunities mean in terms of job creation, real life, paying salaries for consistently for the last 14 years in Nigeria without missing a month, whereas governors are missing salary payment. So you just realize that, okay, so the private sector somehow seems to work, but the public sector, there's something wrong in that place. And I'm like, okay, is there something we're doing right in the private sector that we need to translate into the public sector that we're not doing? And then the third dimension of what I then do is then engaging government. So opportunity to advise, vice president on technology and innovation, for instance, or engage, a state government on state development with economic, growth and development at the beginning. So for me, I get to see quite a bit, and that data is very important. And because His Excellency has defined good governance, accountability, the pillars, the UN definition, World Bank, I'm not going to touch that at all. But I want to state certain things that are facts, and I'm not using slides so that they've also given you slides, So the only thing you need to focus on today are these 2 loaves of bread that I have here. Because at some point they will be very useful in our conversation. And so if you remember nothing today, just remember that there are 2 loaves of bread here and they mean something, But there are 3 things that I want to say. Number 1 is that there is a general misconception across Nigeria that we're a rich nation, that we actually are very rich. And I'm here to say today that we are actually very poor as a nation. Nigeria is actually one of the poorest nations on earth. And the earlier we accept the reality of our poverty, the better we begin to walk towards it. And I'm speaking now not as a faith person, because my faith head would tell me that though I am poor, yet I am rich. So I also understand that. You see how difficult my life is? Because because I'm trained economically in terms of economic development and growth to use indices to query certain things. But I also understand that, he died in poverty, or he was made poor for me to be, through his poverty, that I may be made rich. So, and then I ask myself, how come that hasn't been happening in Nigeria? Because if truly that is true, and that's what we've been professing, how come it hasn't really been? It means that there's something that is fundamentally important, that is a role of government, not the role of the church, not the role of heaven. Because angels don't write policies, and angels don't implement them. So platforms like this, therefore, are extremely important in talking about economic policies, even though we are at redemption camp. Now, so we are a poor nation. The second thing I want to put on ground here is that as a nation, we have moved from the level of systemic corruption to endemic corruption. And it's a fact we must also deal with. Now, systemic corruption is where you're still able to identify an area of corruption and you treat it at source. Like cancer, when you identify maybe it's breast cancer, okay, we need to do this, we need to do that, or prostate cancer. But when it becomes endemic is when the entire organ of the system of the body has been taken over and now requires, what you call divine intervention, for you to rescue the situation. That's where we are. And that's a reality that we must also be able to admit before we begin to move on. His Excellency touched on this very briefly. And he said something that was quite important. We also need to admit that we have very weak institutions in Nigeria and a few very strong men. And there are not many strong women. Let's also know that, in terms of Patriarchy, we're a very patriarchy society. It's in our politics, it's in our religion. So in a sense, weak institutions, these weak institutions, however, were created by very strong men, through our militarization process. So again, we must be able to accept those three and sit with that. So once we accept those realities, because we're trying to put an agenda on the table for the incoming government, now we must then be able to say, what then does this mean for us in terms of economic development? Now, I try so much to really, again, His Excellency touched on it, the difference between economic development and growth. I'm a growth person. I'm a growth person because maybe because I'm from the private sector. In the private sector, we talk growth because when I come into the boardroom, I want to see my financials from last year and say that if I generate a revenue of 1 billion naira last year, growth for me is, can I 2x the revenue this year? Can I even 1.5% it? Can I grow it by 20%? So I think growth. And so because I think growth, I believe very strongly that, and I've also seen indices around the world, that nations that have been able to grow their economy over time and that do what His Excellency said, manage to also then use it to do economic development are the ones that move from third world to second and then to first. So let me put two nations side by side very quickly, and I'll put out some data. China and Nigeria. Again, we mentioned China a lot, but what did China do? Number one, China realized about 30 years ago that it was impossible to grow China's economy at the rate that the population was growing at the time. That in order to have economic growth, they needed to slow down population growth. Well, so what did China do? They issued a policy. You might have heard about it. A one-child policy. Some call it evil policy, some call it, but it was a realization of a nation to say, if we continue to come out busy, come out resi, as we have been doing, 7 children per family, 10 children per family, a time is going to come when our economic growth percentage will be so our population growth will be so lower than our population growth that we will end up in abject poverty. So they had one-child policy. Even at that, they grew up until over 1 billion. If they didn't have a policy, maybe China will be 3 billion people now around the world, and they will have possibly almost doubled the world's population. Thank God for the one-child policy. I mean, we can have a debate around whether it was right or not. Now, what did they then also do? They then realized that for over a 20-year period, so I compared China between 1999 when we came into democracy. I wrote off Nigeria before democracy, saying that we were just playing. But between 1999 and today, which is approximately about 24 years, what did China do consistently? And what did Nigeria do consistently? Number one is that in that whole period, China's population grew by 0.5%. Population, meaning that very small growth. And then China grew in that period by GDP, now not GDP per capita, by their growth, which is the size of the economy. They grew it on average over a 24-year period by 9%. Consistently. In fact, there was a particular year, I think it was 2012, when China's economy grew by almost 18% unheard of in the world. So they went into certain things, as His Excellency spoke about, taking advantage of the people that they now have, the arid land, stealing technology, which I don't advise, but, they did all of that. They then really grew the economy, almost catching up with the US, now number 2 in the world. Extremely important. And if the US is not careful, China before 2030 will become the largest economy in the world by size, GDP. I'm not coming to GDP per capita yet. So you see that in order to have economic growth that has a direct impact on what you call GDP per capita, which is that if I take 1 billion that I made as a profit and I have, say, 10 shareholders and I divide it, what does it come to per shareholder? 100 million. But if I have 200 shareholders, all of a sudden, it becomes about, 10 million each, thereabout. If I have 2,000, it becomes about 200,000. So what China has done is to grow the economy sporadically. Now, what did Nigeria do in that period? Our population between 1999 and now has grown by an average of 2.5%. year on year. Meaning that we went from, in 1999, 114 million people. We've added about 100 million in 24 years. But I wouldn't have worried too much, even if that period, if we did that, but we also grew our GDP. But how did we grow? We grew at an average of 2.8%. Do you see the disparity? 2.8%. So we're 0.3% growth above our population growth, almost at par. Whereas in the 24-year period, the world's population, global GDP growth rate was about even 5%. So we're growing below the rest of the world. That's why when you hear they are leaving us behind, that's what it really means in terms of numbers. That's the first point I wanted to make. The second thing is around, which is the anchor of this session, which is key to good governance, transparency. Now, China realized that one of the ways that they can really advance the economy was to become transparent. Bidding system became transparent. They created what they call open government and all of that. They did all of that, and that really helped. But I want to create a parallel between two countries. These two countries have one thing in common. It's like, again, because I'm in the private sector, I understand revenue lines. Let's say that the one line that generates 90% of my revenue, for instance, let's say that one line is, say, selling speakers. And in selling speakers, this is what generates my 90%. I don't pay attention to how much I really make from selling speakers. I don't pay attention. So I make money, but I don't really know what do I sell, how much do I produce. So that's a problem that we've had. So if I ask what is the number one thing that is in Nigeria's contribution to that we depend on heavily, at least that we export that earns us foreign exchange, which we depend on, what is it? Oil. Another country that also has oil, Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has a company that is similar to Nigeria's structure. In Nigeria, we have NNPC. Saudi Arabia has Saudi Aramco. Aramco, that is responsible for Saudi Arabia's oil, a state-owned organization like NNPC was before it became limited, became in 2021 the largest in terms of revenue and profit company in the world. Aramco. That in fact, when the Saudi government decided to say, we even want to just open it up small and sell 5% to raise money, they raised in excess of about $1.2 trillion from just selling a part of this company. Now, what am I trying to say? One part of the world, the same oil, but in another part of the world, in 44 years of NNPC, we only reported profit once, 2001. Look, there are people here. I mean, governor is here. I'm telling you real data. 44 years of NNPC as a state-owned organization that controls the number one product that we sell, only reported profit once in 44 years. Now we ask ourselves, when we say we are poor, you now see the genesis of our poverty. Right? So on the other side, that same oil is now, and then they asked the Minister of Petroleum in Saudi Arabia, how do you do it in such a way that you monitor every speaker, quote and unquote, oil that you sell? Then it took them to one massive room, coming to accountability, where there's a massive screen that has every single pipeline in Saudi Arabia that leads to any part of the world and vessel that goes out of Saudi Arabia. And he made a statement that I'll never forget. He said, we know what happens to every drop of oil that is extracted from Saudi Arabia and sold to the rest of the world. Come to Nigeria. In this same country, listen, follow me. By the way, I'm just giving us, I'm just buttressing what is, instead of saying I'm riding on your wings. I'm just using the things you said to just go down to practical, so that we don't leave it at the peripheral level and you understand. One of the 3 or 4, 5 top, who I call the core elites in Nigeria, and by the way, if you're in this room, you're part of the elite group in Nigeria. It's a oh, I didn't know you were going. I didn't know it was something to celebrate. Sorry, but you're by a factor. You have a phone. You watch TV. You're in a sense you're a segment of the elitist system of Nigeria. But there's a 1% of the 1%. One of the 1% of the 1% made a statement. He said in Nigeria that about 75% of the oil that we extract is stolen. Now, if you and I said it from this pulpit or church pulpit, everybody will say, what are they saying? What is it? But because of who said it, every media house, and people are now asking as if we didn't know. It's been happening since the day we found oil. Why are we just surprised that somebody said it and all of a sudden we think it's 75%? And then what then made it worse for me was that somebody from the government then came out and issued a statement. I said, well, that was highly and grossly exaggerated by this, because they are also in oil and gas, but it's actually not up to 75%, it's about 45%. So at that point, you are asking yourself, what are we dealing with here? Now, do you see the challenge? So in that, the one item that you're selling in your shop that is the moving good, milk, that's what brings in 80% of your revenue. You don't even know how much milk you have in store. You don't know how much you sold yesterday. You don't know how much you're selling. So that's the problem. That's the second thing I want to put on the table. The last and final thing is this idea of growth, what it really means if we're going to build a nation on the backbone of good governance and accountability. Can I just quickly have two people, very quickly? Preferably if you're also hungry, it might help. But if not, you can also come. Two people, very quickly. Yeah, please, just come over. Two people. Okay, let's stand here so that we don't make a mess. So this bread, please take. This bread represents please follow me carefully. This is very important. This bread represents our GDP today. GDP is gross domestic product. Nigeria's GDP today stands at $450 billion. We've ranged around 450, 500 thereabout for the last God knows how many years. But this is it. Now, this GDP belongs to these two people. They can share it however they like. Please share it. We want to see the God in them or the... Okay, fantastic. It was actually not an exam to see who got the most. No. But the first thing I want to say here is, okay, this is good. I see some students in that place. Forgive me, can I disturb you a bit? I'm almost done. Can I have about 10 of you to come over? Those students, yeah, you're good for this event. Come, very quickly. Okay, I think I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, precisely 10, the number I needed. Okay. Now, this is real economy. We're having economic discussion, but we're trying to use our everyday life to describe it. This is the work that, if His Excellency is sitting in office with, the cabinet, and they're trying to decide what economic policies we should take. Now, these are the kind of things they will be discussing, but they will possibly be using some terms that people might be like, what are they talking about? Policy and this, but bread. Now, this is Nigeria's GDP. Again, the same GDP, 550 or 450. 450. I want you guys to share it. Let's make it as fast as possible. Let's see. I want you to watch as the sharing is going. All right, let's keep going. Let's keep going. Fantastic. I'm almost done. I'm almost done. Let's try and picture something here. Now, on this side, let's for a minute pretend that this is not Nigeria. You've heard about some countries that they say that their GDP per capita, which is the amount of money that is in somebody's pocket or your bank account at any point that you just have as disposable cash at any time. You hear something about $150,000 per citizen. Places like Luxembourg, Norway, the kind of places that we just dream about. This is what is going up there. Is that their population is very few people. Luxembourg has 650,000 people. They generate in excess of maybe about $300 billion. They are sharing it between a few people. See how much bread he has for maybe the next 3 days. So he's fine. He's fine. Even if him, as a super elitist, who is maybe top of the 1%, has taken more, this guy won't complain because, he will last for 3 days, I'll last for 2.5. Everything is fine. You won't see answers. You won't see, everybody is fine. Hardly do you hear that they protest. But even in France, where you came from, they are still protesting right now. Why? Because they don't have this kind of bread, right? The last time they ran out of bread, and the king said, or the princess said, let them eat cake. We know what he ended. He brought the French Revolution. So history has taught us that bread is very important. And that the fewer the people that share bread, the better. Now, let's now come here. When we gave them the bread, did we set any rules? Did we say who should take more or who shouldn't? How did she end up with this bread? Right. So now this is economics in motion. She got the allocation first because she was the first person to go to Governor Mimiko to, Please stay with me. I want you to remember this so that you can have economic conversations with day-to-day, languages. Now, as a new government is coming in, this madam, bless your heart, she just got the bread. And she followed. So let's say the top two people were the first set of people to enter Villa. They locked in their bid. Forget appropriation bid, forget due process, forget we are on ground. And they got their allocation. They then decided that who are the next set of people that will execute the job? They got some. By the time they executed the job, and through whether public policy or whatever it is, let's build road, let's build this, the dividends of this democracy that people died for in March and all of that, when it's getting to the common man or common woman, this is what they are getting. If at all. If I add 2 more people to this place, nothing. That's the first lesson. The second lesson is that no matter how much we grow this economy, even if I give them 2 more bread of the same size, it's not going to be the same size. Do you agree with me? Yeah. That's to Governor Mimisko's point. Yes, growth is important. But if you don't fix equity, justice, those are the 2 pillars on which nations are developed on. It's in the scripture, Proverbs 6, verse 11. He said, on my seat, you would always find equity and justice. That's God speaking. So equity, somebody must be able to look at this system and say, okay, no. You have 1 bread amongst 10 of you. We have to find a sharing formula that allows that is fairly shared across board. Now that's economic development conversation. Economic growth conversation is to say that to start with, this bread is not enough. We have to bake more bread. As I wrap up, let me talk about what the government needs to do to break more bread. God bless you. Thank you very much. And enjoy. You can enjoy the bread. God bless you. God bless you. God bless you. Oh, people are saying they need to reappropriate it. Okay, you guys go and discuss that. All right, so that might require a symposium, to look at the ethnicity and the religious but before we know who gets what, which is a different conversation. Let me now begin to wrap this up as I talk about how do we take one, because we cannot do anything with 10, we already have 10 people. We already have 240 million people. We can't kill them. Even if they japa, how many of them are going? There are still people, and then there's a part of Nigeria where, forget it, people are having 2 children and say, this is what I can afford, and I'm talking about educated people who have money to take care of 10, they're having 2, 1. But there's a part of Nigeria where 4 wives, 20 children, 25 children, and it's happening every single day. So because you cannot do anything about that, the challenge that I'm presenting to the upcoming government is that we have no choice than to 2x the Nigeria economy in the next 10 years. No choice. If we don't grow GDP by 2x and leave income per capita at the current 1,800, more people will enter the poverty bracket. To 2x the Nigerian economy means that we need to make it a 1 trillion naira economy. What does that mean? It means that we have to do some of the things that China did. What did China do? China maintained a consistent growth over a period of time of 9%. I'm proposing that Nigeria must do an average of 10% growth year on year. If we do it year on year for the next 9.5 years, we have a 1.1 trillion dollar economy. That's where we need to get to. That then means that we must then do the following in terms of how do we actually do this. We focus on making some strategic bets, leverage, as we spoke about. What are the areas that will help us double this economy? We must focus and identify. We don't have time to go. There are many areas. We mentioned technology. We mentioned some of the things that are happening, knowledge and all of that and as well. The second thing that will help us be able to do this is ensure that accountability and, more importantly, transparency is extremely important. If we don't know how much oil we are drilling and selling, we have a problem. We say we want to remove subsidy. Some people, we don't even know how much we are paying for subsidy. In 2012, I was one of the people that was part of Occupy Nigeria. I was opposed to subsidy removal. Not because I didn't understand the idea of subsidy removal. I got it. But I was saying that when they remove the subsidy, there are a few people that will corner whatever the benefit of it is coming. There's no cushion for the people. Now I'm for subsidy removal, but I'm also for the palliatives, not the COVID type of palliatives, but real human developmental palliatives that will make subsidy removal very easy. So I present the third factor, open government. We must be able to see how much exactly did we generate from agriculture. And I mean real terms. And begin that now. So transparency, leverage technology to do it. Number 4 is that we must now invest heavily. I feel like the National Bureau of Statistics should become the National Bureau of Data. Statistics, there are figures, percentages. But when you have a National Bureau of Data that tells you what percentage of people are getting what you are producing, then you know and be able to know what to do with that data going forward. And then, number 5, efficient government. I'll share a story here as I close. I went into a country in the Middle East, and in the space of 24 hours, a government of that country issued 24 hours, issued a permit to do stuff in that particular country. In the space of 24 hours, literally every arm of government, the file moved like this because they wanted it to happen from Nigeria. So they issued it. In Nigeria, if it happened in 24 months, that particular transaction, we will be fast. We must run an efficient system, beginning from our airport where FDI is coming from, visa on arrival process. We must look at that and run an efficient system. The last one, efficiency. So inclusiveness. Godmami Miko mentioned something around, I've never in my life seen Nigeria as divided as we are. I thought we were divided before 2023 election. What I saw from Lagos to Rivers to, I didn't know we were that divided. A government that does not focus on how the band of brothers and sisters remains stronger in Nigeria from May 29 going forward will be running a very dangerous government for the next window that we're going in. And now a simple warning for everyone to just watch out for. Every time a new government comes in, two things typically happen. Elite bargains, state capture. I repeat that. Every time a new government comes in, two things typically happens. Elite bargains or state capture. In this particular new administration that is coming, it's possibly the one administration that has the tendency to combine the two. I will try and explain without saying too much, but when you see the signs, either pray, speak up, or both. In South Africa, where accountability, good governance was reigning, a president came in called Jacob Zuma. He's in the public domain. And two brothers of the same family hijacked a whole government, and they did it for 6 years for personal economic gain that has ruined South Africa till this very moment. That made a whole president face public prosecution, Jacob Zuma. That's what you call state capture. Currently, from May 29, we have a tendency of a major state capture in Nigeria. If you look at the... please go and study the history of governors that have been in Nigeria between 1999 and now, and I'm not mentioning any name, and what they left behind within the state that they were in, whether they left behind an autonomous system that was able to operate without them or that continues to operate with them at the heart of it. If it continues to operate with them at the center of it, that's what you call state capture. If you operate without them and they are now former governor and there's no, they can walk into this place, that's a regular transition. Now, if you then take that state government and move it into the national level, then you ask yourself whether could there be a repeat of a national state capture or not? I'll leave you to answer the question. The final thing I'll leave to us as we go, this is to, we said we should present an agenda. It's agenda to everyone. An agenda must agenda. Now, the second thing to talk about is that every time you see a new government coming, regardless of who they are, the most innocent, even if an angel becomes the president of Nigeria, there are people who have what you call elite bargain power. It is in their interest that that bread remains in the hands of two people, not 10. 10 is too much. So we must organize and ensure that we go in and bargain. What they bargain for, every time you see a nation move into development, most elites that are conscientious bargain for development. They bargain to say, yes, we'll make something, but we also need people to, no, this is our environment. They have to drink clean water. Yes, I might get the contract for the water, but they must get clean water. But what our elites bargain for here is that we don't really care much about this, but that we must remain in control of the core resources of the company. And they kidnap, they bargain for the central bank, they bargain for the NMPC, they bargain for power, they bargain for, and they are the ones that create the system that allow for artificial exchange rate and real exchange rate that will leave a nation like this in a diabolical state. I leave you with those thoughts, and I wish us the very best in Nigeria. God bless you.